Frankly, we've been chasing our next guest down for a while. Really wanted to chat with him. I've never had a chance to speak with him, neither has Tiki, and we are very happy to welcome the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, MLB, coming off a great, historic, amazing postseason. The WBC was really good. The start of the season a couple of days away, and that is Rob Manfred, the Commish of Major League Baseball. Sir, Tiki and Tierney, how are you today, Rob?
I'm really good. How are you guys?
Doing awesome, doing awesome. First of all, just on a personal level, and I'm sure that Tiki would co-sign this, very impressed with your early reign. You seem flexible. You seem progressive. You seem to listen to what the public's calling for, and I think that's a great attribute, or attributes, so far.
Well, look, I think that it's important in a job like this to never lose sight of the fact that we put a product on the field in order to keep our fans and grow new fans. And you have to be willing to listen to people in order to achieve that really fundamental goal for Major League Baseball.
You know, Commissioner, I always think about this because I played football and the behemoth that it's become. I wonder if from your perspective, do you compete, right? There is a disposable dollar that every fan has, and football has kind of become king over Major League Baseball. Is that an internal thing that you guys think about? We need to do this better. We need to do that better. We need to compete against the other sports.
We always strive to put the best possible product on the field, and we do compete with other sports and entertainment alternatives generally. And it is a challenge today because there are so many alternatives out there available to people. It's a challenge to make sure that your product, that the game on the field is as compelling as possible.
You know, Rob, you said before how to start, you obviously want to listen to the fans, and you want to, if it makes sense, certainly react to that. And I think that's a great approach. But the interesting thing for you is that, and you're in a unique position in the sense that, unlike Adam Silver, unlike Roger Goodell, you know, the history of baseball, you know, there's been a general reluctance by many to alter the game too much because you want to make sure that it certainly represents what made baseball baseball. So, in respecting history, but also remaining current with societal tendencies and movement, how do you balance that? That seems to me to be the trickiest dynamic for you.
Well, a couple of things on that point. I think that if you try to listen to your fans, you usually are able to find the sweet spot between history and tradition on the one hand and the need for the game to evolve on the other hand. Maybe the best example of that for us in recent years has been instant replay. It was new to the game. It changed the game, but our fans clearly wanted us to use available technology to get the calls correct, particularly important calls. Secondly, I think when people talk about changing the game, sometimes they lose sight of the fact that the game is changing. It has changed dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years. The number of strikeouts, the number of home runs,
the shift,
how often balls are put in play, the way we use relief pitchers. So when I talk about it, I try to make people understand we're not talking about changing the game so much as we are about managing the change that is otherwise taking place in the game. And, you know, you point to other sports, I think you make a great point. The NFL and the NBA have been much more aggressive about managing their sports to make sure that the product they put on the field or on the court is the product that they think is best for our fans. I mean, the NBA game from the 80s to now changed dramatically, all as a result of managed change by senior people at the NBA.
It's true. I mean, even you're getting ready for the Final Four this weekend. I mean, you watch the big dance, the conference tourneys. You rarely see the mid-range jump shot. I mean, for the most part, you talk about how much basketball's changed. It's about dunks and it's about really three-point shooting. So, you know, I think if you follow the sports, I think the changes are far less subtle maybe than some people position them to be. But we're talking to Rob Manfred, of course, the Commissioner for Major League Baseball. The season starts on Sunday. My Yankees kick off 3 games, and, of course, the world champion Cubbies on Sunday night. Full slate Monday, and he's with us here on Tiki Tierney.
You know, Commissioner, I think all sports, really any business, has an objective to grow and to get bigger. Play international games, do things like the World Baseball Classic, which is now just over 10 years old. I think there's been 4 iterations of it. As you guys think about the new fan, the new consumer, you know, is it worth sacrificing some of the hometown, the home field, connections to go international?
Well, we don't feel that we need to sacrifice our traditional connections with fans in order to grow the game. I think the WBC is a great example of how you can create a new event that is actually different. If you looked at the way the games were played, the emotion that was generated by the combination of sport and nationalism, and if you look at our audiences, which were dramatically different than our regular season and postseason audiences, you can't help but come to the conclusion if you find the right new product, you can grow the game without hurting your traditional base.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and especially with the enthusiasm that we saw from especially the Latin American teams in the World Baseball Classic. And we got some comments on it, right? Some people are more traditionalists, others want to see more fun. Is that something you guys, that Major League Baseball thinks about or worries about, I should say?
Oh, we obviously think about that. I think what you're going to see in baseball, in our regular season games, is that the unwritten rules of the game are going to evolve in response to the fact that we have a great new generation of stars out there. This generation of players, much more diverse, huge Latin American population. We've kind of reversed the trend on African Americans. And I think that diversity will produce an evolution in the unwritten rules of baseball. You may not see quite what you saw in the WBC, but I think you're going to see more of that on the field, and I think it's good for the sport.
You know what I wanted to ask you, Commissioner? It's Rob Manfred with us here on Tiki and Tierney. And we referenced before how I actually threw the shift in. You talked about, and you're right, bullpen usage radically different from it was, more matchup driven now, and the bullpen trips, and it's very different. A lot of swing and misses. It used to be guys would strike out, they'd hang their head, they'd basically be disrespected. Now, if you strike out 3 times, you hit a 3-run jack, nobody cares. It really has changed. What I think is a great asset, and I've said this to Tika on the air a few times, a great vehicle for your sport is the Major League Baseball Network, because what it does, the other aspect, and this might be the most palpable one, the game is so much faster and so much more athletic, and I think that network does a great job of bringing that to everybody's homes every night. The game's just quicker.
Well, the MLB Network has been a tremendous success for us. Tony Petitti, great television executive, started the network for us. I think the talent he selected was really outstanding, combination of guys that had played and guys that had not. I think maybe the greatest compliment in that regard is that, our national partners like Fox have taken guys like John Smoltz, brought them to our national broadcast because they're so good. And as you both know, whether it's radio or television, it all starts with the talent. And I think having a great complement of people who played the game and, a 365-day focus on our great sport has made the network a big hit.
Rob, I heard you doing an interview the other day, and I was in the cars at Newark Airport. I was sitting there for about 2 hours. I had a chance to listen to the whole thing, and I said, you know what, when we get him on Thursday, I got to follow up because I don't want to name the interviewer because I don't want to, I like him. I don't want to disrespect him. But I thought there was a natural follow-up which was not there. I thought there was an opportunity lost. You guys spoke about, and you really did, the trying to recreate the amazing storylines. We all know that whether it's NESN or MSG or SNY or, Comcast Bay Area with the Giants, I mean, these regional networks do phenomenally. We know that. And your point with the interview that I heard was that it's up to you. The onus is on baseball to recreate the storylines that made October so special. Now, with all due respect, Rob, you cannot recreate the Cubs' legacy, 108-year drought. That seemed a little ambitious. When I heard your answer, I think it's far more challenging than you actually presented it. How do you try to recreate those? That question wasn't asked. I'd love to hear your answer.
Well, I do believe that you're right. It is more challenging, but there's two pieces to it. Last year, we were really fortunate in that the raw material, right, the 108-year drought, was great, right? So we had tremendous raw material to work with, and we built that story. This year, our raw material may not be quite as good, and as you point out, the challenge will be greater, but there are storylines. There's always storylines, whether it's individual players, how they became successful, franchises, what their history has been, and how the postseason makes, or their trip to the postseason makes them unique. that you have to focus on when the raw material isn't as good, as you point out. The onus on us is that much greater. Absolutely no question.
Commissioner, let me ask you this. If I'm you, and I'm kind of saying this with a smile, but I'm also pretty serious pertaining to business. If I'm you, and I'm sitting at my desk last year, or if I'm at Rig, or I'm watching wherever I'm watching the World Series, I don't know, Rob, there's a part of me that's saying, kind of hope the Cubbies lose so we can stretch this thing out a couple of more years for business purposes, right or wrong, man?
Well, look, I think that the end of the World Series was absolutely phenomenal for the sport. I will admit to you that breaking a 68-year streak, which is what the Indians were, and then coming back into a 108-year streak the next year, those would be pretty good stories. I can admit that.
Not bad. Not bad.
You know, Rob, there's obviously yin and yang, there's ups and downs, there's the hills and the valleys of sport and narratives around your sport. This is one of the peaks, obviously, the Cubs, but there have been some valleys. The Jose Reyes situation last year, now this year with Jerry's Familia. Those things get told, and it's a problem in all the sports. We see it in the NFL, obviously, and Roger Goodell's taken a lot of heat. The suspension that you hand down for Jerry's Familia, 15 games, how'd you come to that? Because there's an argument for it being stiffer. There's an argument for it being not at all. How did you get to it?
Well, I think it's probably unfair to the player to work through the nits and gnats of that decision-making process. I think the best I can do for you on that one, Tiki, is that these situations are extraordinarily challenging. Not just for commissioners who have to deal with it with athletes, but our criminal justice system struggles in this area. I mean, it's an area where the criminal justice system is often criticized for failure to do a good job. What we have tried to do is involve the MLBPA in the negotiation of a policy that stated some shared principles so that we could avoid to the extent possible, we could avoid to the extent possible being at loggerheads with the players' union over what the discipline should be, and the policy has been very effective in that regard.
Respecting the privacy of it for sure, and that's the Commissioner Rob Manfred with us here on Tiki and Tierney. By the way, where that actually occurred, I live right down the road, so I know the area well, Fort Lee, New Jersey, with my wife and my two kids, so I know it well. I remember when it happened. I was all over it, really trying to get as much as I could. I get the sense, Rob, that you almost gave him, maybe more so than Chapman and Reyes, more latitude. To me, it seems, and maybe because my dad's a retired detective, to me it seems as if it was almost more like a plea bargain. Like you leaned on him and his input maybe more so than you did Chapman and Reyes. Is that a fair assertion?
No, I actually think the investigations were nearly identical in the sense that we tried to get all the facts and circumstances. We always try to do that. We try to understand the dynamics of what happened the night of the incident, the dynamics more broadly in the relationship. And the best I can tell you on Familia is the facts and circumstances were just really different than either of the cases that you referenced.
Yeah, well, we know he didn't fire a gun. I trust me. And we said that, so there should be a discrepancy in the amount of games handed out. We got you. The Commissioner, Rob Manfred's with us here, Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio.
Hey, Commissioner, we have great listeners and interactors on our social media, and I got a tweet for you from @VegasSports. It says, Las Vegas seems to be a hot city for sports. Any plans for MLB, now after the NFL and obviously the NHL, any plans for MLB to get a team there at any time?
Well, I have had regular contact with people who are interested in bringing baseball to Las Vegas. I do see it as a viable site in the event that we decide we need to relocate or we decide to expand. I think the NHL and the NFL decided to go there because it is a quote-unquote major league market, and in the event that we get into one of those processes, either relocation or expansion, I think Vegas will be on our list.
Yeah, does that mean that the thought of the danger of the gambling environment is gone, or it's mitigated, it's lessened over the years?
I don't know that it's gone, mitigated, or lessened. I think that the reality is that if someone wants to gamble in today's world, you can gamble wherever you are. You don't need to be in Las Vegas to do it. And as a result, I don't see the presence of the gambling institutions as a bar to consideration of Las Vegas as a major league city.
I would agree.
It's an honest answer. Commish keeping it real. Attaboy, Rob. That's what we want. Want to keep it real. Now, I want to throw this at you as well, and it's Rob Manfred, of course, the Commissioner of Major League Baseball. Now, I've said this on the show a few times. I lived in Vegas. It was my second radio job. Granted, it was the early 2000s, and it's changed quite a bit. And 3 years ago, I got on my show along with Tiki, and I said, they're going to Vegas someday, the NFL. What I think is the challenge for you, it's not inherently about gambling. I'm with you. I don't think that matters at all. The difference with the NFL is that, unlike baseball, I'm not sure if, and I've been to Cashman Field, I know the area pretty well. I'm not sure if Major League Baseball can offer day-to-day sustainability because there's 81 games. You know, you can get 60,000 people there for 8 Raider games and a couple of postseason games if you have to, and maybe a preseason, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, hockey's 41. Baseball, the challenge, the beauty is that you have more games to make money. The challenge is you have 40 more dates to fill. That's, I think, your inherent challenge. What do you think about that, Rob?
I think you're right on the money. I think that whenever we look at a city, Vegas or any other one, we have an advantage in terms of facilities because we have 81 home dates. The people that are drawn produce a multiple of economic impact. It allows for development around those stadiums. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is you got 81 dates where you're looking for 35,000 people every date.
Yes.
And if a market is not of a particular size, it's just very difficult to support those 81 dates.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you guys have had this conversation about expansion or if it's even on the radar. But if not Vegas, what about teams that have lost, like Montreal? Have you guys put any of those other thoughts in mind about other cities that could sustain a Major League Baseball team?
We've thought about Montreal a lot. We've had conversations with potential owners. The mayor of Montreal, I think, could be fairly characterized as a rabid baseball fan. And, I'm not close to the idea that we could return to Montreal again in the event that we get to relocation or expansion. I'm certainly open to that idea, but obviously the issues, largely facility issues that led to the Expos leaving, would have to be addressed before we'd be comfortable returning.
Oh, man, that's a team. I remember collecting stickers, man. When I was a kid, Rob, I mean, and you know as well as I believe you grew up in upstate New York, I believe.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, there were real Expos fans in upstate New York.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to...
The Potsdam and Messina, those people are darn near Canadian,
I know. and Rob, they had a hell of a team to root for. Timmy Raines, Andre Dawson. I mean, those guys were phenomenal. Tim Wallach after that. Let me ask you this. Obviously not injecting politics, but more so just respecting the seat of the presidency, the office. Disappointed President Trump turned down the Nationals' offer to throw out the first pitch? Any reaction to that?
I think it's important that Major League Baseball respect the office of the presidency and always welcome the president continuing the tradition of throwing out the first pitch. On the other hand, I also understand that the President of the United States has very large responsibilities that makes giving up a day at the ballpark difficult.
You know what I think, by the way, Rob?
He just didn't want to embarrass himself.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, listen.
He would have looked like 50 Cent out there.
He tells hey, I was the captain of my varsity baseball team. I don't think he wanted to embarrass him. I think he's got a chicken wing, commish. I think he's going to one-hop one. I think he would have looked worse than 50 Cent throwing out the first pitch, or Baba Booey when he almost threw it backwards a couple of years ago at Shea.
Well, I can say two things with absolute certainty. I did have a chance to spend a little time with the then president-elect. I can say with absolute certainty he is a huge baseball fan, which is a good thing for our sport.
Of course.
And secondly, I think he is very, very confident about his ability to deliver a first pitch.
Rob, what do you think about, and I know that Alex Rodriguez is obviously on TV quite a bit, and he has, somehow, stunningly done a 180 in terms of public perception. Now, personally, and you don't have to comment on this, I think it's a little, selfishly motivated, of course, because he wants to be involved and he wants to make money.
Got a good PR guy.
Yeah, I'm not mad at him. We know his PR guy, and I think obviously he wants to bolster his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. There's obviously motivation behind what A-Rod is doing, but what do you think about whether it's Pete Rose on TV, whether it was Bonds being in the dugout before Mattingly basically told him to get lost? Is this a good thing? Do you think this is healthy for the sport? Do you like that?
I think Alex has done a phenomenal job, both in terms of his reentry into the game as a player and what he has done since he's retired in terms of his broadcasting career. I know that the Fox people think he does a really good job for him, and I'm a believer in redemption. You know, that people can change, and that people are entitled to recover from mistakes. And I think Alex has done a really good job of that.
You know, the crazy, but I'm going to let you go here, Rob Manfred, the great commissioner, only a couple of years in, but all signs pointing in the right direction. And I'm not just saying that because we have you. We generally do really respect, and as a diehard, devout, lifelong baseball fan personally, I'm really enthused at what I think you can bring to the table moving forward. But the crazy thing about Alex is that he actually is a good guy. He was whatever reason, and I'm not even talking about the cheating.
He was in his own way.
Yeah, he just got in his own, kept tripping over himself unnecessarily. So I don't think it's an entirely an act, but if he could have done this 15 years ago, he'd be maybe the most beloved baseball player of all time.
Putting Alex to one side, I mean, commenting on an individual, I try to avoid. I do think that as a matter of perspective, that we try to encourage players to be really judicious in terms of the people they get around themselves and the advice that they're given. It's easy to forget. What did Alex come to big leagues? I think he was 19.
Yep.
I did a lot of dumb things when I was 19.
Yeah, we all did.
I'm sure we all did. And I think sometimes athletes deserve a little bit of a break in the sense that it's easy to get people around you that get you off track a little bit. And I think we should celebrate people who get themselves back on track.
Good attitude. Well, listen, we know that you're busy, certainly really generous with your time. The season's only a few days away. And by the way, just so you know, Matt Bourne is my former college teammate. So when we call again, I know you know Matt, when we call next time, say we get the commish back on Tiki and Tierney. Don't pretend you don't know us, Rob, all right?
All right. Listen, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and we'll do it again soon, okay?
Take care, commish.
It's an honor.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Rob.
guys.
You got it, pal.
Bye-bye.